Well. Welcome back to Krown's Kennel Cave as we get ready for the trading day, starting off with a nice little Saturday. Hey, Lucky, stop dancing. This is a very serious channel right now. We need to talk about some cryptocurrency action, as well as traditional markets, as well as following up on yesterday's short-term and medium-term analysis. Of course, the long-term time frame ranges have been more or less unchanged. And, oh, we got some bell action going on over here as well. God damn it, Elsa's getting a little bit too comfortable with it in the morning. But yes, say hello to the very cute little dog. Isn't that gorgeous? Yes, ring your little sex. Sorry, man. You have to have a little bit of fun in the early morning when Bitcoin's mostly ranging here. So yes, let's go put the focus once again on the Krown Chain application, which can be found at app.krownchain.net. It's 100% free. We do see that the open interest actually come down with price action yesterday. With yesterday's short-term analysis, looking at that range from about 11,500 to about 12,000-ish region, Bitcoin obviously came down and tested the bottom side of that, while open interest coming down at the same time, which would suggest that move was essentially spun about by longs closing positions, which would essentially set in the bias right now that Bitcoin's more or less, as long as it's ranging within this region, is still setting up for a nice constructive base overall. So with that in mind, heading into the weekend, which I do not trade myself, as I really fucking hate weekend action. Again, look at last week's price action. We do want to keep that in mind. Looking at the Bitcoin dominance, still hanging around 61%, still more or less unchanged, slight up there from yesterday to today, and fear and greed index pretty much standard as well from yesterday to today, as in the same vein. So with that said, let's actually go directly into the price action charts right here, right now. And Bitcoin coming down to the 10 simple on the daily, which is essentially the short-term and medium-term range to the downside that we spoke about yesterday, is not really, in the way that I look at it, problematic for the Boolah case, so to speak, in the short and medium term. But of course, if you are trading short and medium term, that was a nice little $400 trade right there. Actually, a little bit more than that, as we did head ultimately down a wick down to about 11,350-ish region. So that's a $550 trade from yesterday to today. Not bad, but overall the ranges are still more or less the same. And seeing as Bitcoin still has failed to actually break this nice little liquid zone, kind of ciphering off the median of this current range for this consolidation between 12,000 and about 10,900-ish region, really have no major changes to be made here. Now, it still would imply the same sorts of things. If Bitcoin actually does close a 4-hour dildo below, especially 11,450, just because, I would err on the side of caution here, especially during the weekend, then yes, I would look for another move back down to, at the very least, 11,100 or 11,200 in this region right here. But still, that is only relevant to the short and medium term timeframes. The long term timeframes are more or less the same. As long as Bitcoin's above 10,900 right here, especially, I'm not really bearish on the long term, and especially the macro as well. But that does offer up quite a nice range here to trade off of. So, is that tradable for you? Well, obviously, only you are the only person who can answer that question for yourself. But $340 trade, $300 to $400 within this range, I think is very much tradable. Of course, it's not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, and just by the same token to the upside is still more or less the same interpretation as well. Any sort of a 4-hour delta closure, especially above 12,000 or even really 11,900, as we do have a nice $100 range here to really set in, which was sort of the relevancy of this past week's of price action. Let me just pull it out so that I can actually siphon this off just a little bit more, because I really want to nail that into a nice $100 range rather than a $150 range. It does seem to matter, especially on the lower term timeframes. My interpretation for this would be more or less the same, driving price action very likely back up to the mid to low $12,000 region. Anywhere between about 12.3 and 12.5 is where I'd be looking towards if that condition is met. Actually, let me just bring this down a little bit right there. There we go. Now we have a nice little $150 range in this long-term liquid zone to the upside as well, which would only really be relevant for the short term. I mean, basically, if Bitcoin did break above 12,000, essentially, I would be looking more north overall, but short term, I would be looking for a short-term pullback out of 12.3 to 12.5-ish region right here. So for right now, heading into the weekend time, or I guess we already are in the weekend time because it's Saturday morning from Helsinki right now. I'm mostly just looking for, as typical on a weekend, both sides of the medium-term range to be tested here. So in this case, probably another test back down, maybe slightly below 11.5 region. But I don't really have any major changes to be made with this area as long as it's still holding. Now, let's go look at our momentum also to just kind of judge if this is likely or not. And looking at the 4-hour right here, we do see that 4-hour stocks are coming down rather aggressively, and they will be meeting this trend line as well, coming in all the way back from early July, 10th of July to be exact. And let's go see what price action was trading at during that time, and that was actually all the way back down around here. So getting this low right here, then more recently getting this low out of this base right here before a nice little move up, and sorry, this one obviously precipitating this move up as well. And then once again, it will very likely test this the same trend line, which is also going to be governing against the edge of the bearish control zone as well. So typically do see some counter trend action right there, or sorry, counter momentum action there anyways. So that test probably happens on the next tick or two, I would imagine, yeah, which is coming in when 2 hours and 34 minutes. Anyways, looking at this right here, what else do we have to be aware about? Is there any sort of divergences building up? No, not really. You'd really want to see some sort of like hidden bullish divergence if Bitcoin is going to set in a base right here at the median of the range. So I think that still is going to, still to be decided. And realistically, today is going to be probably some boringness, if I had to guess, in cryptocurrency land as it typically is on the weekend. Not always. Obviously, last weekend we had a $1,500 move, but overall, more often than not, weekends are pretty sideways within the range. And to be fair, that was last weekend as well, just playing out the long-term range between 12,000 and 10.5 essentially. Anyways, going throughout the lower term timeframes, I do want to check out if the other ones agree with this and if we have any sort of divergences building up here as well. No, same thing on the 3-hour. No hidden bullish divergences building up just yet, and 3-hour stokes are still headed nice and healthily down, and actually going to be breaking into the bearish control zone relatively soon too, assuming that we close this next 3-hour dildo, especially below 11,500. That will inevitably happen. Bi-hourly looks a little bit more looks a little bit more downwards angled as well. Does have some hidden bullish divergence present here, but I believe that that's already played out actually on the 2-hour, getting that move all the way from 11,350 to 11,600. So where do we go from here? I do think that another swipe of the downside of the range, of the short-term range, is very likely, probably somewhere right around 11,004 to 11,450-ish region. But the real question is, do we actually break it? If it breaks, then I drive targets down to the low 11,000s, somewhere around, let's just call it 11,000, give or take about $100. By the same token, as long as Bitcoin just floats above this area right here, I'd look for some sort of hidden bullish divergence to be formed on probably a 4-hour. I think would likely get it. Probably doesn't happen today, but if it is going to be in the cards, probably would show itself around tomorrow, and that'll look for another test of the top side of the range at about 12,000-ish region, or 11,950, 11,900 to 12,000-ish region. But as it stands right now, as long as Bitcoin is essentially following this area, we are still in an uptrend, and this is kind of wedging itself into a prospective ascending triangle here. So that is the relevancy of this 11,450 to 11,500 liquid zone. As long as that area holds, I am actually still overall looking for this to have more immediate continuation to the upside, probably early into next week, especially considering how CME is closed and general markets, which we'll look at soon enough. But if this area does break, yes, I'm looking back down around here. And of course, that can have massive implications for the long term, but that's obviously, a major, a major if, right? So looking at the medium term time frame to see how this is kind of mediated across those, and looking at the 10-hour, what do we have here? We do see that 10-hour Stoch's going to be turning down once again. That I do not like, especially seeing as we do have this trend line forming here, but that would suggest that we have a lot of downside potentially to go. So sideways above 11.5 is pretty much the most critical right now. Could we get another wick down to test this trend line and then close above 11.450 or 11.5? Yes, that's not problematic. Needs to see a closure below there, nothing less, because I still do think that it's appropriate to maintain a bullish boner bias right now. It's just it's a little bit more muted as we are in a consolidation range. Looking at 10-hour RSI, could it be building up some divergences here? Potentially yes, but I want to see just a slightly lower low being printed on this next 1 or 2 ticks on the RSI, and that could come alongside a test down here and close on a higher low. That would also be indicative of hidden bullish divergence building up as well, and drive another test back up to 11.9 to 12,000 probably early next week. So that's essentially what I'm looking at right here. And realistically, if I had to boil down my message into just 1 or 2 points, sideways above 11.5, still constructive, still overall good. Doesn't mean that it's going to just blast up to the fucking moonshot today or tomorrow or even this week or next week or maybe even this month, But as long as this range holds, that would be considered more or less healthy. And keep in mind that this range is very likely to be resolved probably looking at the apex coming in middle of August would suggest a resolution around, actually, I guess this would be early this coming week, Monday, Tuesday. Statistically speaking, when these things get about 70% full, they become very, 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 very likely to break, and that would be right around here, and that's the 11th or 12th of this month of August. So just a few days, seeing as today is the 8th. And what do you know, on the 12-hour, we do see that the 21 exponential moving average is also starting to line up with this perspective bottom support trend line for this ascending triangle as well. So all of these things working together with each other does essentially suggest that as long as Bitcoin's above 11.5, more or less good. And of course, 11.5 is also relevant for the very high term timeframes. And goddamn it, else is on the fucking dishes already. Oh baby, spoon time, motherfuckers. Jesus Christ. Oh man. But remember that, 11,500 is not just relevant now for the short and medium term time frame. It's actually very relevant for the, whoa, okay. Hey, she's getting too fucking comfortable in this bitch. Remember, 11,500 is very much relevant for the macro as well, as that's the exact area where Bitcoin's been getting rejected on the weekly, on weekly closures, which, yes, we do get one tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time at 11,500 ever since January 2018 right here. So if Bitcoin actually can close above that, which would obviously be above the short-term and medium-term liquid zone that we're looking at right now, then we will have confirmed a major macro change of behavior. Now, personally speaking, I actually do think that this is more or less a formality, because when we did close the monthly, I believe it was exactly 1 week ago. Yeah, it was 1 week ago. We actually did close on a higher high above the June highs of 2019, which does confirm this. Yes, it does confirm this as an uptrend. As you know, there's your low, there's your high, there's your lower low, and technically, I mean, obviously we already closed on higher highs already, so it is continuation first and foremost. But when we go down to the weekly, we actually didn't see the weekly fall through at the same level as well, which is a little bit concerning. You'd expect that your lower time frame would naturally precipitate your higher term time frame. So it is, one before the next, of course. However, obviously it's going to have a chance to confirm that tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So I do believe that this is a rather important one. And realistically, for all the short-term bullshit that we just spoke about at the beginning of this video, that's really fun and cool to look at over the weekend. But I would really, and of course, this is speaking from my own perspective, but I'd really, suggest, not suggest, no, that's the wrong terminology, but I would perhaps employ a more higher term time frame look on this, because we are at a major level here, and this has greater implications with this level. So just explaining this once again. Whoops, let me take this off. Looking at this area right here, which is also synonymous with the 0.5 fib at 11,500ish region. Any sort of a move above there and a closure, or sorry, not just move, but a closure above there is a confirmed change of behavior on the weekly, and this will very likely initiate targets into the mid 13,000s, then 16,000, and actually 20,000 after that. So I do think that it is worth waiting for, because there is a lot of things to be aware of on the higher term time frame. So the saying that I was looking for employ was like, don't lose sight of the forest and the trees, or don't lose sight of the trees and the forest, whatever the fuck it is. Just the bigger picture obviously is taking over right now, and of course, it's not to say that you can't make money on the lower term time frames. Just right now, there's things that I think a lot of people have been waiting for the past 3 years, or almost 3 years, that are actually going to have a chance to confirm major changes in just one day. So yes, I'd keep an intentful eye on that region. And looking at momentum oscillators on the weekly, it would suggest that is my main disposition as well. Looking at weekly Stokes, they are actually going to confirm another cross the upside with any sort of a weekly closure above 11,250. That's very interesting, because that's obviously above that 11,500ish region that we just spoke about for pretty much all time frame relevancy. Very, 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 very important. Also, weekly RSI getting into the bullish control zone for the first time since 2019's run, where Bitcoin actually set in a very similar base within this region, which I want to spend some time kind of talking about right now. Now, yes, we did start off this video with the lower term timeframes, but the focus here is on the higher term timeframes. Lower term timeframes mostly for crypto degens. And not to say that you can't make money off of them. You can make a shit ton of money, of course, but You can also mask it with sandpaper. It's going to feel better if you just, use the old Elmer's glue instead. But looking at this right here, weekly RSI has actually been very, 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 very good at indicating the start of major macro trends, both to the upside and the downside. In this case, to the upside, we do see that anytime it enters the bullish control zone, that's actually your long-term upwards markets. Going back to this last read that we had right here, a lot of things going on here that are very similar to right now. Bitcoin puts in a 3-month consolidation on the lows in an ascending triangle, right? Right there. I'm actually going to draw it in so I can just save this chart and just show it, without having to do it again. Something like this. And guess what? That's exactly what we did right over here in the low $9,000 range, something like this. There we go. Over about 3 months, right? And during that time, historical volatility percentile on the daily was contracting to major lows. We see this all the way coming down right here to a single digit read, and then also, of course, right here even more aggressive to a 0 read for multiple days in a row. Quite nasty indeed. And then what happens on top of that? If we go back to the weekly. Well, the weekly RSI enters the bullish control zone right here, right fucking here on the 29th of April, right? The 29th of April was actually after this first major girthy green dildo. It's actually right here at the end of this sideways consolidation. Very similar to kind of what we're doing right here as well, as historical volatility percentile is also expanding. If we go back down to the daily, obviously on the weekly, it doesn't have enough history to really populate itself in like a usable way right there, but we see the same thing right here, right? Contracts for 3 months, boom, straight down, and then absolutely fucking redlines it. And then expands for the next few months. That's essentially what you're looking for. It does imply that the greater the higher term look is going to essentially expand in that direction as well. And same thing over here as well. We do see a nice contraction phase going all the way from March to where we were in kind of like mid-July, and then massive explosion. And actually, we haven't even got that high on this. I mean, obviously it's all relative, right? But seeing as we're still kind of living above the moving average on this, I do still think that we're in the process of maintaining this trend, and seeing as this is more or less shaping up as well right now, higher highs and higher lows, the trend is your friend, and the uptrend is kind of shaping itself into a bullish reaccumulation formation at the same time alongside a macro level. Anytime that you consolidate alongside a major resistance, typically going to break out in that direction. Same thing for major supports, typically going to break in in the direction of that trend. So in this case, they would be to the upside. So looking at this right here, my main disposition is that this is still good as long as, again, major contingency here, as long as Bitcoin is especially above 11.5, but even 10.9 I do think is more relevant for a conservative look on it, because that is more or less the greater range that Bitcoin's operating in right now. So all of these things do come together, and I do think that they are, they all have, or they all play a nice part in kind of forming up the good old bias. Realistically, though, do I expect to move over the weekend? Well, expectations are a terrible thing to have. I do think that, during the real trading week coming up, probably do see another try to the upside. Looking at daily Stokes, they're actually in a cross back up to the upside with any sort of a closure here above 11,500. And sorry, I didn't even finish up my RSI point. We haven't just seen this for like the last try right here. And I really just like looking at one and implying that that's always going to be the same thing. We see the same thing actually throughout 2015 to 2016 here as well. So you see that after the 2014-2015 bear market right here, which started, by the way, when Bitcoin got kicked out of the bullish control zone on weekly RSI. Sometimes it can literally be that simple. It lived in the bearish control zone pretty much the whole way through, and then guess when it actually got that first test right here into the bullish control zone on the reversal of trend, the confirmed reversal of the weekly trend. Oh my god, this fucking kitchen shit is so goddamn annoying. That's for you. Jesus Christ. So yes, looking at this right here, obviously, it did oscillate to and fro the bullish control zone and the neutral zone on all of these moves, but it just kind of stair steps its way up to 20,000 ultimately. But I do think that it would be relevant to look at the neutral zone and the bullish control zone as kind of like interplays between each other as to where Bitcoin's likely to base off of during those times. This can be taken one step further when we go over here to our other chart on CME, or sorry, looking at the Trollinger Bands. where we see a very similar interplay as well. Remember that same area in 2019 where Bitcoin really started to trend up quite aggressively? Well, it was also confirming a closure above the topside Bollinger Band right here at the same time. If we go back to the 2014-2015 switch up as well, we got our first close. Well, actually, we get a closure right here, but we get our first open and closure like on this run right here, which essentially leads up the next whole upside market. Again, this is all coming along an expansion phase on historic volatility percentile after about a 3-month contraction phase. So all these things work together essentially, and look at where we are right now in the current stature of Bitcoin on the weekly Bollinger Bands. We are going to have a chance once again to close above the top side of it for the first time since this past run, and guess where the top side fucking Bollinger Band is? 11,600. So a little bit above the range that I'm suggesting at about 11,005, but more or less the same as far as as far as I'm concerned on the macro. Very, 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 very close. Of course, maybe not exact, but close enough is close enough. And what's more important to me is that CMEs have actually already done this as of last week. Now, yes, this week they actually did get pushed back into inside the top side Bollinger Band. That's okay, but it does offer up a nice way to be looking at this coming into the next week of price action. As long as we are above last week's traded low, I actually do still look at this very, very likely to get reaccumulated and give another try to the upside of the top Bollinger Band. You see this very often, and this is why it's important to wait for an open and closure. You see back on over here, your first stint above does get pushed back and offers up a nice little sideways consolidation. But once you start getting opens and closes above that level, typically the trend does emerge, or at least get another try in that direction as well, which at this price point, obviously has greater implications. So again, making relationships between all the different time frames here, short, medium, higher, and even macro as well, or you could even say super macro, I guess, really does start to bring in the perspective. So realistically, as long as Bitcoin is above 11,005, I'm not like even short-term bearish on it. I just look at this as like a nice range being formed here with, potentially another test back down to 11.3, but it's closures here that matter most. Closing below 11,450 or 11.5, yes, maybe then we have a greater retracement back down. But my higher term time frame range still remains the same at about 10,900 base. As long as Bitcoin's above there, I don't really see like a major reversal. However, if Bitcoin did break that area, let's go back to our charts over here. If Bitcoin did break that area, it'd derive the same targets as what I've been saying this past week, assuming that Bitcoin closes a 4-hour dildo below. Hey, get back on over here. This blue box right here, I would look for an overall return at the very least back down to like 98 to 9,900 with a bounce along about 10.5 and maybe even another small one at like 10. No, probably not. It's close enough to the target anyways. But 10.5 probably does give a small bounce there as well. But overall, again, as long as Bitcoin's holding this range right here, I'm not looking for anything like that to happen. It's just that would drive my next sort of biases if Bitcoin were to actually switch that up. So let me just bring it around a little bit more here. How long is this video? 22 minutes already, huh? Let's go check out world markets really quick. Let's go check out Nasdaq Futures, of which they sold off a little bit on Friday. But also getting picked up here as well. To me, this is just a retest of the breakout once again. Now, of course, coming into Monday, this offers up a very similar way to kind of resolve this whole formation here. Essentially saying that as long as we are above about actually 11,000 even, maybe even a little bit lower than that, I actually still look for this for this to get another try to the upside. As far as momentum oscillators go, we do actually have bearish divergence present on daily RSI, but the problem with that is that I don't really trust it when you're getting this sort of a signal like this low in the bullish control zone. You really want to see it happen more towards a critical zone for like the really good reads. This one obviously good for a short-term pullback, but is it going to be good enough to reverse what is the weekly, monthly, and quarterly trend at this point? I would be skeptical of that. I believe that we're just playing within this region right here. And yes, formations do work rather well on RSI. For these sort of flag formations. In this case, this would be a descending channel, which statistically speaking does break to the upside more than the downside. And I'd still be kind of having my eye at that 11,400-ish target, which is born off of the measure move from this formation right here, and then also the fib extension at the 2. at the 2 read right there. So all those things again match up with each other. And looking at the weekly, is this problematic from a weekly perspective? No, it still looks like continuation. Monthly well, way too early to judge a monthly right now. But looking at this right here, I would be looking for another another retest of this high. And if it takes out yesterday's high at all at 11,283 and a quarter, I would be looking just for it to kind of float up naturally to that next target, at which point I'd be looking for a medium-term pullback at the very least. Maybe a major high gets put in. I do think that this coming election is very likely to be a major pivot on the market. If Well, I'll leave that out until it gets a little bit closer. But realistically, I don't really expect a major reversal in the market until like around election time. That would probably make the most sense, as this one is going to be very much politically driven, and it really is going to. It's very likely to drive a lot of price action. I was trading traditional markets as a professional when Trump got elected, and that was one of the most just melting up markets that I've ever seen. I mean, obviously it was the most melting up. It was just straight fucking up, because everyone expected Hillary to win, and her sort of policies and whatnot with regards to just Wall Street and business and trading were interpreted not as nicely by the market. So once Trump actually won, it was just straight moon for just about all major markets. Of which I do think that we're going to decide again on this next election. Again, not a political statement. I'm not a political person. I don't give a fuck who wins, except, I mean, it would be nice to have taxes lower, I guess. It's good that, that's quite nice. But realistically, as far as markets go, that is very likely the way that it's going to be interpreted once again. If I had to pester a gander at this point, looking at some of the top techs like Microsoft, Apple, Microsoft consolidated at a high level as well. It looks actually very similar to Nasdaq before it just floated up out of this formation right here. In fact, so let's go back to Microsoft for a second. Where are you? There you are. Coming into next week, what I'd be looking for here, I'd still be looking for this one. Yeah, does it come back down and fill the gap first, and then we get another try to the upside? Maybe. But overall, it looks to me like the market's going to get another leg here. Just overall, looking at Apple, looks like a little bit of profit taking. I don't see any reason to be bearish on this thing as long as it's above 430, especially. Weekly close rather strong, rather decently as well too. A lot of people are going to be shorting this just because it looks like a little bit of a shooting star dildo. The problem with it is that we haven't really confirmed it as a local top just yet. So continuation below 430 is essentially where I'd kind of look at that one. Tesla coming down more again. I really strongly believe Tesla is going to be the big indication that the world markets are going to turn down. It was the first mover to the upside. It was the most aggressive move to the upside. It went straight fucking parabolic in a way that only Bitcoin knows how in like 2017. And during this whole last melting phase where the Microsofts and Apples, the leaders were still going up as well as most of the markets, Tesla was not. So we're seeing rotations here, and I'd be looking for this area to break, just like we've been saying for the last week or two, to denote when we're going to see a bigger turn down in the greater market sphere. And targets would still be derived all the way back down to like 1,200 low, and then probably lower than that at 1,100 or 1,000 base over time. So this one I think is very indicative of the overall market's health, as we just see rotations like this typically tell us when the actual market is going to reverse. And I think that Tesla is going to be the one for this next one. Couldn't I be wrong about that? Yes, absolutely. So that's why it's always better to just watch whatever name that you're trading to begin with, anyways. But as long as Tesla's below 1530, as we said, I think that the top is in for a long time. It very unlikely sees this top anytime soon. Now, if it does take out 1150 to the upside, I would look for a retest of that prior high. But the problem is that everything else that can rally is rallying right now. So when something that's been going parabolic like it's its fucking job, like Tesla, is not joining the party when it essentially could in this environment, then that's actually a sign of slowly kind of turning a little bit unhealthy in the greater market sphere. These obviously take time though. In looking at E-mini futures for SPY, this is continuation here. We are seeing rotations in effect, and rotations are still more or less healthy. So as the tech start to take a little bit of sideways and down, the broader market is still working its way up, and I'd be looking for a retest of the prior all-time high at about 3,400 coming into next week. and probably new all-time highs after that, to be quite honest with you. Looking at the monthly right here, remember, monthly is still in an uptrend. Monthly never was bearish, never was fucking bearish, never even got into a downtrend, even during that whole coronavirus thing. And I get a million fucking comments about this, and I'm not saying this to sound facetious or talking downwards, but a lot of people ask, but Krown, what happens when second wave of coronavirus hits? Did you learn fucking nothing from the first one? It's all driven hype as far as the market's interpretation of it. Coronavirus, obviously real. I'm not saying that that's not true. Obviously it is real. It is a threat to susceptible populations. But, statistically speaking, and this is purely statistically speaking, I understand that this will probably piss off some people. It's not my intention, but statistically speaking, this virus has about a 99.999 survival rate. So I'll leave you with that. By the way, Finland's barely even had any fucking lockdown, no masks here, and everything's business as usual. So sorry. Anyways, go check out gold as well. What's gold doing? We can maybe even look at silver today as well. A little bit of a pullback here. Bearish divergence. Nope, actually no bearish divergence on a daily just yet. Interesting. I'd be looking forward to pop back up early into next week. I don't know. I don't feel so confident about continuation overall here though. This one's been a pretty aggressive move to the upside, as you can see. Bitcoin-esque move, you could say, and the range is here rather large. But do I probably look for a pullback, maybe back down to test around $2,000 base or just under it, like 1985 coming into early next week? Yes, but I would be looking for a bounce there, and then we'll come back and analyze it. I don't see any sort of volume climax here just yet. I would still be looking for this to at least give another try to the upside. But let's look at silver as well. A lot of people ask about silver. I'm not really a fan of like the rocks, but this one looks a lot more toppy to me. This one looks like it's essentially blowing its top. And silver, it's just yeah, this is a great area for a more medium-term pullback at the very least. It's a macro area that it just tested into, and I look for it to probably trade back down towards what is this area? 26 3/4, and we'll see if it can set up a base in this region. If it can, then it will very likely get another test back up to the $30 range, and if it breaks there, then you can actually have a nice nice party up to the mid 30s. It looks like. So it would be considered constructive as long as it plays within this range right here. But if it does break the range to the downside, let's call it $27 or $26.50, I'll be looking for a return all the way back down to 24 and probably beyond. I'm always skeptical of something like silver when it rallies. Not that I even traded to begin with, but overall, this seems to be a little bit of a late joiner to the party in comparison to gold, for example. And this does definitely look a lot more toppy than gold. A little bit of a volume climax here as well, and you can see a lot of volume being thrown down on these red dildos here. So it is losing momentum. I imagine we probably are building bearish divergence on the daily. We are building bearish divergence on the daily, and any sort of a move down below Friday's low at 27.37, not even a closure there, but just a move below there, and I look for extension to the bottom side of this range actually at 24 to 24.25. So fair enough, and this would be a damn good area to pull back in regardless. So I actually do think that that's what's happening here. Let's go look at what else we want to look at. Maybe euro dollar. I think we hit all of our long-term targets. Yes, indeed we did. A couple moves up to the blue box. We said very likely a pullback from that region. I think that that's exactly what we're seeing right now. This is also the 200 exponential moving average on the monthly, and the long-term trend coming in all the way back from 2008. So playing out a range here is kind of the same thing as silver in the sense of this range between 117.5 and that 119.5 blue box right here. Sideways there is still constructive long term. Personally speaking, though, I do think that it puts in a major top here over the next month or two and trades its way back down towards 110 and maybe below, but that won't really be confirmed as far as I'm concerned until we get a weekly closure below this last breakout zone, which was like 115.5, it looks like. So I'd be looking for some sideways here. Now, if it does break above the topside liquid zone, I'd be looking for a massive extension towards like 1.25. Big run probably happens if that does, if that condition does get met. But for right now, looks to me like this would be a damn good place for it to reverse off of, and that means that Dixie's probably finding its lows, which I believe we said Dixie was likely to find a big bounce at around 91.5 to $92. Let's see where it's trading right now. It's 93.25-ish, but how low did we get? Nice. Okay, 92 and a half. Didn't get quite down to my target of 91.5 to 92, but close enough is close enough. Does it have another drive down here? Maybe yes, but overall, I do think that it will start to form a nice base within this region. In long term, looking 4 or 3 to 5 years down the line, I'm actually massively bullish on this, but short term and medium term, as we said for the last like month and a half, bearish, yes, down to this area, and it looks like it's actually starting to make its way down there quite a bit. So I keep an eye on this coming into September and October, but does seem to be playing off those levels rather well. So I do like that still for the long-term macro move, and that obviously plays into having a bias on euro dollar, probably put in a major top where it is right now. But that's going to take a long time for it to form, very likely. Anyways, let's go check out another major index, triple Qs. See if they're looking healthy as well. Looks like a little bit of profit taking. I'm still bullish on this one as long as it's above the breakout point of 268. Looking for targets probably up towards where are we looking here? 250 to 270, probably like 300-ish region. Yes, somewhere around there would be about right. Let's do a little bit more of a muted move. 280 to 290 is where I'd be looking towards, somewhere around there. Now, of course, that also means that if the breakout point does get faded to the downside below 268.25, I would be looking for a return to the low side of the range overall, and maybe we could talk about a major top being put in. But overall, I do think that the market's getting another the broad market's getting another leg here, alongside probably Bitcoin as well. And then we'll play out some sideways and down, and decide if this market actually wants to reverse, probably around election time, or if we're just going to get massive melting up continuation as the fucking money printers keep on keeping on, I suppose. So what else do we want to talk about? 36 minutes into this video. Let's go check out what's it? Let's go back to this chart right here. I'm curious if there's anything else on the daily Trollinger Bands to be aware of. Very interesting that the median Trollinger Band is coming in basically in the low side of our bottom, of our long-term liquid zone to the downside between about 10.9 and 10.8. It will naturally meet up with that level in the next day or two. So it obviously has a very positive slope here as well. So I do like that. That reminds me, what about on the weekly for this chart right here? Just looking at major moving averages, I'm never going to be bearish on something that is literally above all of its major moving averages, and they are all divergent away from each other, and they all have positive slopes. Now, this one over here is a little bit more efficacious than what we saw per se for late May rally coming into 2019, as it wasn't necessarily a perfect test. This one obviously a lot more constructive, setting a base as they start to cross up. That's obviously being interpreted a lot better, alongside momentum oscillators agreeing with that move essentially as well. So all these things do tend to work together, and still kind of seeing the same thing. It would be more akin to what we saw back on over here in 2014, 2015, setting in a base above all these major moving averages as they start to flatten out and then get their positive slopes, getting all lower periods trading above higher periods. So same sort of thing. We don't really have too much history other than that, so it's not not something that I'd like put all my eggs in a basket. It fits into the greater narrative though, so I do think that it's worth talking about. What else do we want to talk about? Weekly jewels essentially confirming a hot or long signal thus far. I still think Bitcoin gets another leg up here. Probably towards short-term, medium-term, like the next few weeks, probably 12.5-ish region, we'll call it, give or take $100. And then seeing where we kind of like close the weekly would maybe derive the next sort of set of targets to the upper 13s. I looking at this chart, it looks more or less good. And seeing as we're in the crypto nerd session, or sorry, the TA nerd session, it's not the crypto nerd session. Those spoons are already long gone, baby. It's the TA nerds right now, which is my kinds of peoples. Then yeah, it more or less looks good, man. I don't really have any real reason to be bearish as long as we're especially above 11,000, we'll call it, and even 11,500 looks good to me. It doesn't mean that it can't happen, but if you're waiting for something for 3 years, what's another day waiting for confirmation here? I think that's a rather what's the word that I'm looking for? Rhetorical question. Anyways, is there anything that we missed? Let's go look at some shitcoins, see what they're doing. Mr. Buterol taking it on the chin yesterday as well. Actually, let's go to my more long-term chart on this one. All the way down to 375. Actually, the same zone that we had. Actually, no, not exactly the same zone. I had about 370. How far down? Oh, we got down to 362. Or sorry, 363. But as far as horizontals go, yeah, still kind of playing off this. I'd be looking for it to give another test back up towards 390-ish region short term. Does look like it's going to try a higher low right here. It's going to try something similar to Bitcoin like this, but that also is going to imply that that 373 is at, or what is this exactly? 372.5 is absolutely critical. As long as it's above there, yes, I would interpret this as likely to try to fill out this space, and that would be an ascending triangle at a topside, at a topside resistance, which, breaking above there would start to derive targets towards about 350 to 360, or 450 to 460-ish region. But that also does imply that if it does break this range, which again is 372.5 to the downside, on at the very least a 12-hour closure. Can a 4-hour do it? Maybe yes. I tend to trust lower time frames less on anything that has less liquidity than Bitcoin, which is quite nasty, which would be Mr. Buterol. But if that were to happen, I'd look for a drive down to the 21. There is bearish divergence present here, and it's going to be building up for another leg. We spoke about this over the past few days, that there is a head and shoulders here on daily RSI. That move has actually played out already. So we did get that move down to 370, or I mean even a little bit lower than that of what we spoke about. But right now, I'd actually be looking for it to give another try back up, and then we'll kind of see where it lands. And I imagine that Bitcoin's weekly closure tomorrow is going to have massive implications for how the rest of the market is going to react at this level, Mr. Buterol included. So yes, move down here. I'd look for extension, another like $30 to 345 region, and then another bounce at there as well. But for right now, as long as it's right in this trend line, which probably does, probably does, at least for the time being, is this going to wedge itself into an ascending triangle? Maybe yes. I mean, that's kind of what it looks like as of right now, although 2 data points is not necessarily enough. But it would have about the same apex as what we see on Bitcoin spot 2, middle of August, suggesting a high resolution likelihood somewhere early this coming week, around the 11th or 12th, actually, again. So I do like that. And the target again to the upside would be somewhere around like 450-ish region, if this area were to be closed above, which is 408. What else do we want to do while we're here? I feel like I've been speaking too long, maybe a little bit too long. Let's go look at Link really quick. What's Link doing? The darling of the markets. Link on Coinbase. No. We want it on Binance, I think, because it has more price action history there. Wow, what's this? New all-time highs for Mr. Link. Are we at our $10.50? Oh my God. We are right fucking there, baby. We are right fucking there. Yes. So this was the 1.618 the 2.618 fib extension. I would be cautious within this region. I don't think that it's out of the question to get another pullback back down to maybe like 9.5. Well, shit. No, we just did that the other day. No. This one's getting continuation right now. Daily RSI is what I'd be using right here. It is going to very likely be forming bearish divergence, or at least going to have potential to, but until we actually confirm a local high, I would not look at it as such. So these next 2 days are very critical for this one. If it does confirm a local high here, which will not happen as long as it's above, especially like $10, we'll call it, then I'd essentially just be looking for continuation. And this one, when you get to levels like this, it's like I said, Fibonacci extensions will work. They are algo-driven targets, but realistically, you're in a blue sky breakout, price discovery essentially, and things can just get crazy at this point. So I wouldn't be surprised if it did. If the weekly closes above, let's call it 10.5 or 1064, I think is what it technically is. I guess $14 to $15 is where I look towards next. Over time, obviously, it's not going to happen on the same day, or at least very unlikely, but it would still fit in the narrative of the overall market getting another leg up, and then probably playing out some down and sideways. But yeah, Link's gonna have a chance to close above this tomorrow on the weekly. If it does, I'd be looking overall on the weekly much higher. Doesn't mean that you're gonna have ebbs and flows on the lower term time frames. You certainly will. But my main disposition would still be looking for some more upside. That's again only if we close the weekly above, let's call it 1069, because that's a great number. Let's go back down to Bitcoin. Let's go look at some probabilities on these ranges. We'll look at the short-term probability range to the downside, which we'll say is like 11,450. Give it a little bit more room here. To the upside, we'll keep it at 11,9. And then for the long term to the downside, we'll use 10.9 here. We can maybe even flip this up a little bit, something more like this, just to be a little bit more aggressive with it. And I think that would be appropriate. So it'd be more or less a range between 10.9 and 11,000 rather than a range between 10.8 and 10.9. And I do think that is correct here as well. So let's go into our probability charts and see what they say. And we'll use 11.9 to the upside, and we'll use 450 to the downside. So remember, this is relevant for the short and medium term range to the downside. This is relevant for the long term and macro to the upside, really. So looking at, this is a 12-hour, by the way. Looking at this time frame, a 12-hour, it would show that we have a 22 and almost 0.75% probability to close above 11,900 today. I think that would be very unlikely today. Especially if we're playing out some sort of a reaccumulation formation. It's just going to take time, really, versus 32.5% to the downside. So the probabilities technically are in favor on the short-term resolution to the downside, driving targets down to like 11,000 or 11,100. On this next 12-hour delta closure. I would imagine, though, as time goes on, as we see, today and tomorrow, and then early next week, these probabilities will naturally start to flip around in favor of the upside once again. If and only if Bitcoin can maintain above that 11,450-ish region. If it breaks there, yes, I would be looking towards another move to test the downside of the range. And then we get to play the game of, are we going to actually see like a reversal here or not? But these levels are very well documented and very clear. And so as a trader, I really like that. As a cryptocurrency moon boy, I don't really care because that's not how I trade. But it's obviously a lot easier to make money in a straight up market. And looking at the daily, these probabilities are actually more so in favor of the downside. Once again, 28, just over 28% probability to the upside versus 37.5% probability to the downside. So bears have the ball in their court right now over the weekend, which to me is, you know my thoughts on weekend price action to begin with, most likely. And remember, this is only relevant for the short and medium term to the downside. If we just take 11,000, we'll call it, technically it's probably like 10.9, but 11,000 just being more aggressive with it to the downside. The probabilities very much favor the upside resolution here. And remember that these are more relevant to each other, both driving, higher term time frame moves. Between these two different pivot points. And that's on the daily. On the 12-hour, it would suggest a probability of 22.77% resolution to the upside, probability to the upside, versus 4.42% to the downside. So, obviously on the higher term timeframes, it's still an interpretation of of still continuation, essentially. However, too much hesitation here will be bad, but I would give it another week or two at the very least, as long as Bitcoin's above 11,000. 11,000. I just don't really see a reason to be fading this. This is just what appears to be another higher low right here. I'm curious. Is there any hidden bullish divergence building up on any of these time frames? We saw it like building up, but we don't see anything confirmed here. So yeah, if Boo laws are going to take control or flip this one back around, it probably does take a little bit of time. If I had to call it today, I actually do think that we get another move back down and test around like 11.3, maybe a wick down there. But as long as Bitcoin's closing those, at least 4 hours and above, let's call it 11,450, probably just fills out the range a little bit more. And overall, let's still look at this as more or less healthy. Now, there is one major pushback on this, and that's a 12-hour jewel will maybe line up for a sell here, but that would be very much contrary to the haughtier long signal that we see on the weekly, which obviously holds more precedence as it is a higher term time frame. So I think I've probably talked your head off by now, probably annoyed the shit out of you, and so I think it's probably a good place to leave this video off. Again, to the upside resolution, driving targets into the mid 12,000s, I'd be using 11.9. The median, or sorry, the short-term resolution of the downside, pretty much right here at about 11,450, would very likely drive targets back down to 11,000 ish. And then if Bitcoin were to break below 11,000, I'm not saying that it's going to, and I honestly don't think it's going to here, but my opinion does not matter. I certainly do not trade my opinion. You've seen it be wrong a million fucking times, 1,000,001 fucking times, probably more like. Then I'd be looking for an overall move back down here, and that's essentially how I would be trading this as of right now. This is not to be construed as financial advice. It is the furthest thing from financial advice. I'm just sharing exactly how I'm looking at these markets and that sort of same situations that may or may not be useful to you. Anyways, with that said, I'd like to wish you well once again. Take care, and until next time.